I want to start today by asking you a question about architecture, but not the kind you usually see on magazine covers.
Right, we're not talking about glass skyscrapers or grand libraries today.
No, definitely not.
Do it.
Talk about the invisible spaces. If I just say the phrase locker room to you, you probably have a pretty visceral reaction.
Oh, almost everyone does.
Right. Maybe it's the smell of stale sweat, or the sound of metal cleats clacking on concrete, or, maybe it's just the memory of feeling totally awkward in high school gym class.
It's historically the most utilitarian space in a building. I mean, it's a transition zone. You enter as a civilian, you strip down, you suit up, and you become an athlete, and then, well, you reverse the whole process.
Exactly. It's like a processing plant for humans.
Mhm.
But today's deep dive is actually challenging that entire definition.
Which is what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a case study here from Union College in New York, and it involves a company called Legends Custom Lockers. And looking at the project notes and the source materials we have, this wasn't just a standard renovation.
Not at all.
It reads more like an excavation of a facility that was actively fighting against its own athletes. Our mission today isn't to walk through a sales brochure. We want to look at this as a real study in problem solving.
That's a really fair assessment, because this isn't a story about just installing some shiny new cabinets and calling it a day. It's actually a story about thermodynamics, material science, and how physical space completely dictates human behavior.
And it all starts with what I've been calling a geographic tragedy.
That is a very dramatic way to put it, but honestly, it fits perfectly.
We have to set the scene for you listening, because when I first read the site conditions for the Union College football locker room in our sources, I honestly assumed it was a typo.
It's not a typo, but it is a massive cautionary tale for facilities managers everywhere.
The football locker room was built directly underneath the hockey rink.
Which is actually more common than you'd think in older multi-purpose athletic complexes. You stack the venues to save on the overall building footprint.
Sure, space is expensive.
Right. But from a physics standpoint, it is an absolute nightmare.
Let's break that down a bit, because I think most people, myself included, just hear under the rink and think, oh, it must be kind of chilly down there.
If only it were just chilly.
Right. The notes describe a much more aggressive problem. We're talking about battling constant, severe moisture.
It's a classic psychrometric problem. So picture this. You have a massive slab of ice upstairs, maintained at, let's say, 18 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
That cold permeates straight down through the concrete slab.
Creating this giant, freezing cold ceiling for the locker room sitting right below it.
Exactly. Now, downstairs in that locker room, you have 50 to 100 football players coming in fresh off the practice field.
And they are hot.
They are radiating heat. Plus, the showers are running, pumping out all the steam, so the relative humidity in that space just spikes massively.
So you got hot, wet air rising up and hitting a freezing cold concrete ceiling.
And that is when it hits the dew point. The air literally cannot hold the moisture anymore as it cools against that concrete ceiling, so it condenses. It drops.
Wow.
It's not just feeling damp.
Yeah.
In severe cases with these physics, it can literally rain indoors.
That is wild. And the source material mentions the old equipment they had, these standard metal lockers down there, was literally rusting out.
Yeah, completely failing.
And that's not just cosmetic damage. That's oxidation eating right through the steel, because the environment is essentially functioning like a rainforest.
And think about the smell. That constant moisture breeds bacteria, mold, mildew. You can scrub the floors all you want, you can spray whatever you want, but if the air is heavy with moisture and the lockers are rusting from the inside out, you simply can't clean that smell away.
Because it's a structural problem, not a housekeeping problem.
Exactly. It's baked into the physics of the room.
This is where I really want to pause and talk about the why does this matter aspect.
Yeah.
Because the easy answer is just, well, rust is bad and we should fix it.
But it goes much deeper than that.
Right. The project notes dive into the psychology of this environment. Union College didn't just want new lockers because the old ones were ugly. They explicitly felt the space was actively hurting the team.
It's the theory of enclosed cognition, but we're applying it to architecture here.
Break that down for us.
Sure. If you stand in front of a team and tell them, you are elite, you are high performance, we expect championships from you, But
then you send them to the swamp.
exactly. You make them get dressed in a room that smells like a damp cave and has rust physically flaking off the doors onto their gear.
There's a huge disconnect there.
A massive cognitive dissonance. You're fighting the room before you even get out to the field to fight your opponent. It drains mental energy.
The source material actually quotes the staff saying the space didn't feel like it belonged to a modern high-performance team. They literally said it felt like a dungeon.
Which is the last thing you want your athletes feeling before a big game.
So Union College has a crisis on their hands. They need a real fix. And they bring in Legends custom lockers. Now, usually when a vendor walks into a space like this, they bring a glossy catalog of their prettiest wood veneers and say, all right, pick a stain.
Just covering up the problem.
Right. But Legends apparently took one look at that ceiling and said, do not buy wood and do not buy metal.
Because they realized that putting standard materials in that specific room would just be a sunk cost. If you put wood in there, it warps and rots. If you put metal, it just rusts again in 3 years.
So they proposed a major pivot to something called phenolic material. Now, I've heard the word phenolic in passing, maybe mostly in relation to heavy-duty lab countertops or those tough public pool partitions. But what is it, really? Is it just a fancy plastic?
Calling it plastic really sells it short. Phenolic resin is more like a geological formation that we make in a factory.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
It starts with layers of craft paper. Think of something similar to heavy brown bag paper, and those layers are completely impregnated with phenolic resin.
Wait, paper? They built lockers out of paper.
Layers and layers of it. But then it's subjected to extreme heat and massive pressure. This process fuses all those layers together. It's not just gluing them, it chemically bonds them into a single, solid, extremely high-density sheet.
So it changes at the molecular level.
Exactly. It becomes completely non-porous.
So it's basically synthesized stone at that point.
Pretty much. It's entirely impervious to moisture. You could pressure wash it if you wanted to. You can hit it with a football helmet. It won't delaminate because there are literally no layers left to peel apart anymore. It's one solid mass.
Wow.
For an environment sitting right under an ice rink, it was really the only engineering choice that made any long-term sense.
But here's my skepticism with that, right? If I'm a star recruit visiting the campus or a big donor walking through the facility, does phenolic actually feel premium? Or does it feel like I'm at the local YMCA getting ready for water aerobic?
That's always the hurdle.
Because usually, indestructible translates to cheap looking.
And 10 or 15 years ago, you'd be absolutely right. Phenolic looked very industrial. But the technology in the decorative layer, the very top sheet, has advanced incredibly.
Oh, so they can make it look like other things now.
Yes. They can now bond high-fidelity wood grains or sleek, matte textures that are visually indistinguishable from the real thing until you physically touch them. And even then, they feel dense and substantial. They don't feel hollow or cheap.
So Union got the look of a traditional high-end wood locker room. The notes mentioned a cherry finish, very classic college football. But it was built out of a material that could practically survive a flood.
Exactly. Form followed function, but the form didn't have to suffer at all to get there.
But getting new lockers was really only half the battle here. And this is the part of the notes that really caught my eye. Legends didn't just drop off pallets of phenolic lockers, hand over an invoice, and wish the college luck.
No, they had to go much further.
They actually got heavily involved with the HVAC system.
Because they had to. It's what the notes call the holistic fix. Think about it. If you put a completely waterproof locker in a room that still has 90% humidity, your shoulder pads are still going to be wet the next day. Your jersey is going to grow mold. The locker survives just fine, but the equipment inside it still dies.
So what was the fix for that? Did they just tell facilities to turn up the exhaust fans?
They worked directly with the HVAC team to analyze the airflow through the lockers themselves. This is a crucial detail. A locker can't just be a closed box anymore. It has to act like a lung.
A lung. I really like that image.
It needs to breathe. They designed the physical layout and the specific venting of the locker so the building's HVAC system could actively pull dry air through the storage areas.
To actively dry out the equipment inside.
Yes, this is the hidden engineering we're talking about. It's solving the invisible problem, the stagnant moisture, so that the physical solution, the new locker, can actually function the way it's supposed to.
It seems like such a basic requirement, right? Dry equipment. But it's amazing how often something like that gets completely overlooked in favor of flashy LED lights or giant illuminated logos.
Well, dry equipment is fundamentally a health issue. It prevents staph infections. It prevents severe skin issues. So we go right back to the performance aspect. You cannot perform at an elite level if you're nursing a skin infection you picked up from your own damp shoulder pads.
That makes total sense. So they solved the physics problem. They stopped the rust, they dried the air, they handled the humidity. Now we get to the really fun part of the case study, the lifestyle shift.
Yes, the evolution of the space.
The notes mention that once those basic survival needs were met, they could actually focus on the student-athlete experience.
This is essentially Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but applied directly to a locker room. Base level is shelter and safety. No rust, no mold, dry gear. Then you move up to the next level, belonging and esteem.
Yeah, and charging ports.
And charging ports.
It sounds so trivial on the surface, doesn't it? I mean, do we really need USB ports built into a football locker? Is that just coddling athletes?
I'd argue it's absolutely essential resource management. Look closely at the daily schedule of a Division I or Division III college athlete.
It's grueling.
They have class from 8 a.m. to noon, then lunch, then film meetings, then a massive practice, then physio, then mandatory study hall. They are completely nomadic throughout the day.
Right.
Their smartphone or their tablet is their entire administrative center for their life.
And if that battery dies, they miss the text from the athletic trainer, or they can't submit the essay that's due at midnight.
Precisely. So if the locker room provides a secure, powered place for their tech, the locker room suddenly becomes a true home base. It drastically reduces their cognitive load.
They don't have to stress about it.
They don't have to worry about finding an outlet in a random hallway and sitting on the floor. They know their locker has them covered.
The renovation also included something called quiet corners, dedicated study nooks right in the locker room.
Which is really fascinating when you think about a football team.
It is. I mean, you naturally picture a football locker room as this loud, chaotic space with hype music blasting through the speakers. Why would you purposefully carve out quiet space in there?
It comes down to those small gaps of time in their schedule. You might have 40 minutes between watching game tape and your next team meeting. If you try to go all the way back to your dorm room, you lose 20 minutes just walking across campus.
You're wasting time commuting.
Right. But if you stay right there in the locker room, you can actually knock out a reading assignment. But that only works if the physical space actually supports that behavior.
Because if it's just a flat wooden bench, you're just going to take a nap. But if it's a dedicated desk space, you're much more likely to work.
Exactly. It's a physical signal to the athlete. It says, we value your time and we value your academic success. It completely redefines the room from being just a storage closet for gear to a comprehensive resource center.
And visually, they definitely went all in. The notes detail laser-cut logos, illuminated custom nameplates. The photos in the case study materials make the place look like an exclusive nightclub, but in a very classy, functional way.
That's the pride element coming into play. When a space looks deeply custom, when it looks expensive and thoughtful, the user naturally treats it with more respect.
It changes how you act.
You don't leave your trash on the floor of a 5-star luxury hotel lobby.
Right.
But you might leave it on the floor of a rusted metal shed.
It's basically the broken windows theory, but working in reverse. If the windows are polished and pristine, you naturally want to keep them polished.
Exactly. And that is what builds internal culture. The players start policing the space themselves. They start saying to the younger guys, hey, pick that up. Don't leave your tape on the floor. This is our room.
So the project finishes. The rust is finally gone. The impenetrable phenolic material is installed. The iPhones are all charging. And apparently, Union College was happy. Very, very happy. Because this whole thing completely snowballed.
It really did. And this is where we get into the business strategy side of this deep dive. How exactly does a standard vendor transition into being an indispensable partner? Legends started with just the football program. But then they got the call for the basketball locker rooms, then volleyball, then men's and women's hockey.
And now the notes show they're slated to be included in the brand new hockey center build that's scheduled for 2025. They basically captured the business of the entire college campus.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, you know, the cynical answer is that they just gave them a really good bulk discount. But looking at the notes, it suggests it's much more about the specific person running the show for them. Grace Parker.
Grace Parker. She is the project lead for Legends, but she also happens to be a proud Union College alum.
Which definitely helps, sure. The whole old school ties thing gets you a meeting.
It gets a meeting, it opens the door, but it absolutely doesn't keep the door open. You can be an alum, but if you botch a major campus project, you're just an alum who botched a job.
They won't hire you again.
No. What Grace brought to the table was extreme user empathy.
The source material quotes her directly. She said she wanted to help the college shape ideas structurally, financially, and emotionally. And I have to say, emotionally is a really weird word for a construction project manager to use in a quote.
It sounds weird until you realize exactly who she's dealing with on a daily basis. She's navigating between the facilities director who cares strictly about the maintenance budget and preventing rust, and the athletic director who cares mostly about recruiting numbers and adding flash.
And then you have the coaches, who really just want whatever will help them win games.
Exactly. Grace's philosophy, and there's this great mantra in the notes, trust is earned, not installed, was all about bridging that gap between all those different stakeholders.
Yeah.
She wasn't trying to upsell them on flashy features they didn't actually need. She started by solving their deepest pain point.
The swamp, the rust.
Right. She proved they could solve the absolute hardest problem on the entire campus, that room under the ice rink. And once they delivered on that, specifically by using a material like phenolic that might have actually been a harder sell initially.
Because it's not the traditional cherry wood that donors are used to seeing.
Right. She had to actively convince them to trust the hard engineering over the visual tradition. Once that worked, and the locker room didn't fall apart after a season, she earned massive political capital. That allowed her to guide the design philosophy for all the other sports facilities.
It strikes me that the human element here is really just about active listening.
Yeah.
They didn't come into the first meeting with a generic pitch deck saying, hey, here is our 2024 product lineup. They came in, looked at the moldy walls, and figured out how to fix the building.
That is surprisingly rare in this industry. A lot of times the approach is just, here's our catalog, please pick a model number. Legends acted much more like strategic consultants than equipment vendors. They took full ownership of the final outcome, not just the physical product they were dropping off.
And that outcome is exactly what I want to circle back to as we start to wrap up this deep dive. We've talked a lot about the technical engineering, the material science of paper and resin, the business relationships. But ultimately, when you boil it down, this entire thing is about the student athlete.
It absolutely is.
There is so much noise in college sports right now. You know, you turn on the news and it's all about name, image, and likeness deals, the transfer portal, billion-dollar TV rights. It is so easy to think that money and exposure are all that matters anymore. But reading this case study, it feels remarkably grounded.
Because the real work of college athletics happens in the dark. It happens at 6 a.m. on a freezing Tuesday in February. That is when the actual culture of a team is forged.
When there are no cameras and nobody is watching.
When nobody's watching and you're exhausted and your body is sore, if your physical environment is constantly fighting you, if it's damp and dark and depressing, it becomes so much harder to find that internal motivation to push through.
But if the environment is actively elevating you,
If the environment clearly says to you, we built this space to be bulletproof because we believe that you are bulletproof, that fundamentally changes a player's mindset.
it becomes a force multiplier for the whole program.
It really does. Look, a nice locker room cannot tackle a running back. It cannot score a goal, but it sets the baseline standard for the people who do.
I think that is the core takeaway here. We ignore the container at our own peril. We get so obsessed with the content, the team, the players, that we think that's all that matters. But the container actually shapes the content.
Absolutely, the space dictates the behavior.
So here is the final challenge for you listening right now. Obviously, most of us are not actively building multi-million-dollar Division I athletic facilities. Most of us are just trying to organize our garages or maybe set up a slightly better home office.
Or even just carving out a productive corner of the kitchen table.
But the underlying principles we've talked about are exactly the same. Take a hard look at your own space today. Is your physical environment fighting you?
Is there constant friction in your day? Is there the personal equivalent of rust in your space? Maybe it's not literal rust. Maybe it's just visual clutter or terrible lighting that gives you a headache or an office chair that constantly hurts your back.
Or maybe it's a lack of a convenient charging port exactly where you actually need it to be.
Right. Are you wasting mental energy fighting your environment just to get your daily work done?
Because if Union College can figure out how to turn a damp, rusting cave located directly under a freezing ice rink into a high-performance center of excellence, you can probably figure out how to fix your desk setup.
The bar has officially been set.
Exactly. Don't just decorate your space. Engineer a solution for your behavior. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Catch you on the next Deep Dive.